Thank you for setting the bar so high on this introduction, too. So, and I love that you're right up front, because I'm going to talk to the two of you beautiful ladies a lot in this, too. So it's interesting, this book, and I'll talk a little bit about it at the end, is my second book, and a national publisher. And a couple months ago, we were going through kind of the process to get it to market, and how do we market it, right? It's on Amazon. What do we do with it? Is it? Okay. All right. I'm going to try. It'll be all over. Hopefully I don't, if I hit myself, nobody can laugh with it. And it was interesting. The brand strategist, right, that comes from the publisher said, I think we have a secondary target market, right? Clearly this book is written for business leaders and business owners and people who want to make their culture stronger in their organizations. And they said, but I actually think our other target market is Gen Z. And I went, what? And they said, this is a book they're going to want to read because they're going to want to work for companies and leaders that get it. And so I love that you guys are here, and here's the deal. I bring my kids to all sorts of events, and you don't have to understand everything we're saying and that we're talking about, but just know you're surrounded by people that are doing really good things, and that will rub off on you. So I think it's awesome that you're here. So what I want to talk about today, and I want this to be informal, so as I'm talking, if you have questions, if you want to have a comment, let's have that dialogue. I'll try to leave some time at the end for that, for sure, and I'll stick around afterwards. But in the work that we do, we help high-growth businesses, right, from a strategic standpoint, from a leadership, and from a culture standpoint. How do you grow with less pain, right, is our focus with our clients. Because you can grow, and there can be a whole lot of pain in that growth, and we're trying to just figure out how do you eliminate as much pain as you can. And what we're realizing, and where this kind of keynote and presentation came from, is working with so many companies where we started to see pain with the leaders, right? We don't know how to motivate people. We feel like people are burnt out and we don't know what to do. And it was happening before the pandemic, but the pandemic just absolutely accelerated it. And so we talked to them about bridging the gap. And a stat that I just read recently from SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management, they said 1 in 4 Americans dreads going to work. 1 in 4. Now, it's not people in this room, right? Because you're optimists, but that's a big deal when you think about an organization, because career optimism is an all-time low. That's what they're saying, and they believe that it costs U.S. companies $431 billion a year. Right, and these are not costs we're seeing on the P&L. It's costs that aren't making it to the bottom line, right? Because it's sick time, it's unproductive time, because people just don't, right? They're stuck in organizations. And so what we believe is we talk to organizations about balancing business needs and human needs. And this is the big shift that is happening when you look at generational changes, is we have to understand that the business needs to grow. The business needs to be profitable and have innovation. And the humans need belonging. And they need to feel like somebody cares about them when they come into work. And that takes work, right, to make that happen in an organization. And so the work we do is right in the center to say, how do you use the culture to propel your business results? And we talk a lot about, again, bridging the gap. And what we're seeing right now in corporations and in small businesses, it's all across the board, in community groups, right, is on one side, we have people saying, we need more, right? We need more from our people. We need to do more. And we've got leaders standing on the other side going, I'm drowning. I don't even have time to get the work done that I need to get done. We have employees saying, I want to feel more valued. I want to use my strengths more. Right? And we have leaders saying, I don't even know how to use my own strengths, right? And I'm not being taught to do that. And we just talk about this gap and what's happening. You feel it, you guys, societally. We're feeling it in our communities. We're feeling it in our organizations, is we've got this gap that continues to widen. And so my focus on being here today and talking to all of you is I believe we have to be the people that says, enough, let's come together in the center and figure out how to do this the right way. Right? Figure out how to support the employees and also support the leaders and allow the organizations to thrive. Right? How do we start to bridge that gap in between? And I believe it starts with awareness. We cannot fix what we don't understand. Right? And from a culture standpoint, we now have the data to show that positive cultures, they've been studying this now for the last 7 to 8 years, positive corporate cultures outperform the S&P 500 by 6 times. in revenue and profit. So this is no longer maybe we should think about it, it's now what's driving results in organizations. And I wanted to share this with you because, again, I think it's about perspective. And I talk a lot about that on the podcast, about deliberately shifting your perspective, putting yourself in rooms, exposing yourself to things that isn't what you already know, right? How do we start to do that? And this was from a recent study that McKinsey did. And they sent these questions out to employees who had left organizations, right, within the last 6 months, and then employers that had had people leave. And they asked them, to the employees, what extent did the following factors influence you leaving your last job? So the list they gave both was the exact same list, and they asked them to order them. Employees said sense of belonging, valued, caring, right, all of these value type things. And when they asked the employers the exact same thing with the same list, the employers prioritized, they left because of development opportunities. They wanted to work remotely. They were being poached. Does anyone recognize the key difference between these two lists? What is it?
Good management.
So the employees are saying, I just want someone to care about me. And the employers are saying it's somebody else's fault that they left. We're disconnected. Right? And it's not because we're bad leaders and we're bad organizations or they're bad. It's because we're not having these types of conversations. Right? We're not opening these kind of conversations. And we're seeing stats like 77% of job seekers right now are saying that they're looking at a company's culture, meaning social media, online, how they talk about themselves before they're even going to apply for a job. Right? We've never seen stats like this. This stuff used to be at 30%. And now you're hearing from recruiters that we've had clients that we're working with trying to improve their cultures where they've had people that have pulled out, like really strong people that have pulled out of the interview process because of they're starting to sense cultural issues, right? They're just saying, I'm out, I'm good, I can go find another company. And so it is an issue and it's going to become an issue. And I think just us talking about it is part of the solution, right? Knowing this data and knowing and understanding that culture matters. And we've got to figure out how to do this right in our organizations. Whether we agree with some of the younger generations, I was telling the table, I have a PhD in Gen Z. I have 4 kids between the ages of 15 and 21. Like, I think it's an actual thing. I'm going to start putting like the PhD behind my name. There are days where I'm just like, you're aliens. Like, I don't understand you. And there are some days where I'm like, there is some hope there that they are going to bring something different to the table in terms of their thinking. I don't think, seeing these there's a lot of hope that they can fix, right? Some of the issues that we're having, but we've got to figure out how to bring that forward. I wanted to throw this in because this is really important to me. So the book is built around this model. This is the model we developed in 2018 because we were working with so many organizations that had great strategy. They had great products and services, and yet they couldn't figure out how to maximize their performance and their results in the organization. And we started to realize it was because there was a lot of other factors they weren't looking at, right? And so we call this our impact model, in that business now requires us to be aware and be good at all of these things, right? Not all at the same time, but we've got to start looking broader when we think about our organizations and how do we make them thriving places to be. So that's just a little bit of background on that model. And again, there's more in the book. But what I want to talk about today is I truly want to talk about how do we start to bridge the gap, because my goal is to arm people like all of you to then go out into the communities and into businesses to say maybe there's a different way to think about this. Maybe there's a greater impact that we can have. So I'm going to talk about 3 ways that we see in organizations that I think applies to community groups, that it applies to our education system, right? It's all across the board that we can start thinking differently about this gap, right, that's really been created, and how do we start to close that and come together in the middle. Sound good? Okay. The first one is we have to shift our perspective. And this is hard for a lot of us because we're set in our ways, we know what we know, we believe what we believe, but the world is becoming even more global, meaning global is coming to us, right? In the past, me growing up, I didn't have access right, to what we now have at our fingertips. And that's primarily what we're seeing in this just Gen Z generation, is the world doesn't feel as big to them because they have access, right, to a lot of that. And as organizations, we've got to figure out is how do we get comfortably uncomfortable, right, about what's going on, and how do we start to shift this and bring these younger generations in to figure out how to harness, right, the value of what they bring to the table. So I wanted to just throw in here, if you can read it. So this is our whiteboard at our corporate office. And this is our big conference room where we do all of our work with executive teams, right? We make them sit there and we're working on the whiteboard. And we purposely put this quote on the wall above the whiteboard. And it's the Einstein quote that we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Think about that for a moment. That's what our world feels like right now, is it's uncomfortable, but we have to start thinking differently, right? About what's going on, about what we believe, and those beliefs we've had for our entire lives, about what we believe about the world, our communities, all of those things. And so I think it's really important for us to be optimistic, right, about what we can do, but we also have to be willing to do the work, right? And not just say, let's keep doing what we're doing and hope that something else changes. We are the change. This room of people is the change. And that's why I'm here and said, heck yes, I will come talk to this group, because I want to arm you with information to be able to do that. So I want to tell you a story about one of our clients. So this is Lakeview Industries. And I'm guessing, anybody heard of Lakeview Industries?
Yeah.
You actually have? Oh, I thought everybody would say no.
Hathaway.
Yeah? Okay. Okay.
Raytheon.
Okay. So this is a small family-owned business in an industrial park in Chaska, Minnesota. Very unassuming. They make extruded and molded rubber parts for large OEMs, right? Like super fancy business. But they're a high-growth business, right? They have a lot of really big clients. And they've been a client for 5 or 6 years, and I tell their story because of the shift that they made. So on a Friday in March of 2020, right, we might remember that day, some of us, when Governor Walz announced the shutdown. The executive team of Lakeview came together. They figured out, what the heck are we going to do, right? We're sending everybody home on Friday. We don't know what that means. And they decided to convene on Saturday morning at the plant, just the executive team, and say, we got to figure out, right? Just like every other company did. We got to figure out what we're going to do with our people. What does this mean? How long is it going to be? And the president of Lakeview, John Schwenke, had a neighbor who was a doctor. And that week, that neighbor had brought a face shield to him and said, this is what we're using, right? This is what's happening at the hospital, was telling him the story. And so John said, can I have one of those? And Saturday morning, he showed up at the plant and showed his executive team this face mask. And he said, we do plastic, we do molded rubber. Could we make this? They had no idea. They have huge machines. Within 36 hours, they had a working prototype. And within 4 days, they had made 50,000 face shields. They had no idea how to make face shields. But the shift that happened that they didn't realize till months afterwards is the company they were before that was no longer the company they were after. Because what they had proven to themselves is that they could pretty much do anything. Right? Where before they thought they could just do what they had always done. Right? The same products they had always done. But what started to happen, and so this is a picture, if you can see it, this is actually, I think this is from the Star Tribune article that they did. They got a lot of press and PR from this because they were one of the first companies in the country to do this. But what happened for John is he started to look around, and since then, only 2 members of his executive team are still there. And that sounds really dramatic, but it's been a really good move for the organization, because what he started to realize is he was a growth-minded leader that said, what if we aren't fixed in our capabilities and we actually can really do pretty much anything? Our customers throw at us, right? The world throws at us. And he started to realize he had a lot of leaders on his executive team that couldn't get there. And so once you start that path and you start to become something different, it's really hard to go back. And so naturally, people started to leave. They asked some people to leave, but they've rebuilt the organization. And they've done what we call created a new employee agreement. And this is the thing that I think is really important for all of us to understand is the agreement between I want to work for you and I'm going to work hard and yes, you pay me, and the organization saying we're going to support you, not just pay you, right? We're going to support you and we're going to ask more of you, but here's what we're going to give of you and to you in return. That's the new employee agreement. Their people are being asked to do more than they've ever had to do before, but they're also, as a company, saying we owe you more because of that. We owe you better communication. We owe showing up with our values every day as leaders, right? And treating you the right way. And so if you walked into Lakeview today, you wouldn't even recognize it. I know people that used to work for them that are like, they're a completely transformed company because they decided to take a chance, right? And double down on their strengths and what they thought they were capable of. But it was not easy. Turning over, and any of you who have owned businesses, turning over almost your entire executive team in a 2-year span is not for the faint of heart, right? You've really got to believe in it and know that it's the right thing to do. So I think it's a really interesting story and a great local win. But my question is where do we need new agreements? In our communities, right? In our organizations, in our schools. Where do we need to create the space for some of these different conversations that we've never had to have before? That doesn't mean they're bad. It just means we need to be thinking about what are those different questions that we need to be asking as leaders in the communities. So the second key is look below the surface, right? So I tell the story about you've got a bridge, right? And for a lot of us, we're standing on top of it going, everything looks good, right? Looks like traffic's flowing, everything looks great. But how often are we looking underneath, right? To say, oh, there's some cracks, right? There's some things that we can't see that are actually the strength of the organization, right? The things underneath. And so I want to share a fun story with you here. So does anyone recognize this young man? Who's it? Ben Utek. So Gopher. He also just happens to be a 2006 Super Bowl champion tight end for the Indianapolis Colts. He's also one of my dearest friends and one of the best humans you will ever meet. This is also Ben. That's not the Ben I know. I know the other one. But over the years, Ben and I have done a lot of work together around culture and really talking about the parallels between the football field and the boardroom, right? And the business side and how that really works. And so I want to share, and I have to look at my notes on this because there might actually be sports people that are going to call me if I say these stats wrong. There are? Okay, so I prepared appropriately. I usually mix them all up and my son would be one of them. He would actually know, and he was barely born in 2006. So the 2006 Colts surrendered 5.33 rushing yards per attempt. That was the 7th worst in NFL history. They won the championship with the statistically most efficient offense in the league. In 2006, they entered the playoffs as wild cards. In the conference championship against the Patriots, they were down 21-6 at halftime and came back to win the game, and it was a record-breaking comeback. In the Super Bowl in 2006, some of you might remember, they were playing the Bears, and Devin Hester returned the opening kickoff for a 92-yard return and a score, and the Colts came back to win that game. They should not have won the Super Bowl that year. Why do you think that they won? They're not the best in the game. What was the difference?
Passion.
Part of it? This was their difference. The huddle. They knew where their strength came from. They knew underneath what made them strong, right? The Tony Dungy, Peyton Manning era, they focused on what we'll call, and I'm going to talk about conscious leadership, love, care, and respect for each other first, the game second. And what most people don't know is a huddle happens 60 to 70 times a game. But it's when the cameras are playing, you were watching the chip commercials and the beer commercials. Nobody cares about the huddle, right, in terms of TV. That's when the TV timeouts happen. but they practice the huddle. They would have entire practices dedicated to the huddle. Ben talks about his performance reviews had parts of the huddle that were videotaped, and they would critique him on how he performed in the huddle. Did he make eye contact with Peyton Manning? Right? Was he listening or was he distracted? Right? The huddle was their strength. The huddle was where they bridged the gap between business needs, we need to win games, and human needs, we need to care about each other, and we need to just care about the next play. Right? Can we do it right the next time and learn from it and then do it all over again? What is that secret thing, right, that really makes us strong? Because oftentimes we think it's the flashy stuff that everybody else sees, when really it's the stuff behind the scenes, the nights and weekends, right, the crises that happen and how we react to them, that actually is the strength in our organization. So if we don't know what that is, we've got to figure it out, because that's what's going to make the real difference as as our organization thrives and moves forward. And the third key is conscious leadership. And all of our training, everything we do, it was the basis of our model. We talk about conscious leadership, and it's an evolution of leadership. The command and control style of leadership of, I give you a paycheck and you give me 40 hours or 50 hours, right? Whatever that expectation is. I hate to break it to you, but those days are gone. And we don't have to like it, and we can be frustrated by it, but we also have to step towards it. And what people are asking for is to be treated like humans, and that's the whole person. That's not just when I come in your doors and what I need from you. It's, do you care about what I'm going through personally, or the causes that I care about, right? Are we having those conversations? And to some leaders, it feels a little touchy-feely still, but for businesses to thrive, we are at a transformation point in our society that we have to start saying, how do we come together in the middle and really create, right, an impact? So I was going to pull this next slide out, and then I found out there was going to be some young folks in the room, so I kept it in. Laugh, chuckle, get it out of your system.
I looked exactly like that.
Okay, did you? Okay, so home perm, men you don't understand. You may have had sisters. Anybody remember the home perm days? Thank you. Sitting in my dining room with my mom yanking on my hair to do, and that horrible smell and the stuff she put on my head. I'm like, how could you put that kind of chemical on a young child? But I wanted the perm, and she'd do the home perm. So these were the home perm days. This was circa 6th grade, but I want to kind of explain to you about this. In 6th grade, I was 5'9" and 95 pounds. How many of you men were 5'9" in 6th grade? None of you. It was horrible. It was horrible. My nickname was Olive Oil, if that gives you a visual.
In my high school, you would have been a basketball star.
Yeah. I wore the baggiest clothes you could find because I did not, right? I wanted to put weight on. Oh, if only someone would call me Olive Oil today, I'd probably be ecstatic. But I share this because I want to also share a story with you. So when I first started at Cargill, I went and got an IT degree. And today, I almost don't even admit it, but I was an IT person, right? Because that's what was really big when I was graduating. I was one of maybe 4 women in most of my classes, but I knew it was the next big thing, and I didn't want to do marketing or HR or finance, which is where all the other females were at, if that tells you anything about my personality. And so I got an IT degree, I got an international business degree, and I got a job with Cargill. Right, I remember the day, I'm from Iowa, right? So I remember the day that I told my dad I was going to work for Cargill. I'm pretty sure it was the happiest day of his life. And then the saddest day of his life was when I had to tell him I was becoming an entrepreneur and leaving a company like Cargill, and he was like, what are you thinking? Right, he thought I was crazy. So it's a tale of both. But I went to work for Cargill, and 6 months in, I hated it. I didn't hate Cargill. I hated IT. I wasn't good at it. Right? I had gotten a degree in something that I'm like, oh my God, this is not my strengths at all. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, it's super technical and I don't like that part of it. And Jackie was my first boss. And 6 months in, I had my review. And she sat me down, and we had a great relationship. I really liked her. And she sat me down and she said, yeah, we need to talk. And I was like, okay. And she said, you're not an IT person. And my first reaction was, I know, right? Like, thank you for recognizing. Like, this is I'm horrible at this stuff. And then it came out of my mouth, and I was like, uh-oh, I think I'm going to lose my job, right? My brain caught up to my mouth, and I was like, I'm going to lose my job. And instead, she said, you have so many other strengths that a lot of our IT people don't. I was good with the business. I was great at project management and getting things done, right? All of these other things that didn't take technical expectations. And she said, give me 6 months, and let's get you into a role that really utilizes your strengths. What would have been the easiest thing for Jackie to do? Fire me and find someone for what she actually needed. That's what conscious leadership is. That's the difference, right? If you want a simple example, is saying that person's worth it. I'm going to invest the time and put the work in to figure out how to pull out their strengths because the business is going to benefit. Short term, it's not my easiest decision. Long term, it's the right decision. That's the difference as leaders, and what we need to do and what we need to do to the next generation is figure out what their strengths are. Because I'll tell you, this girl that you see on the screen was a follower, did not know who she was just trying to hide. If I had not had conscious coaches when I was playing sports in high school, if I had not had mentors through college and through my career, on the outside, she'd look a lot older and maybe not have the home perm anymore. But on the inside, that girl would still be showing up today. That is the profound impact that we have as leaders on other people, right? In our communities, in our groups, in whatever it is. So my question is where are you showing up as a conscious leader for the people around you today? The last piece I'll share here is this. Anybody know what this stone is called? Nice, pass. Good job, you guys. This is the Keystone Stone. And I've done a lot of traveling. I've lived in Europe. And you see these beautiful arches and bridges that have been standing for, I don't even know how long, right? And they're still there. And the reason is that keystone is the apex, right? It's what's holding all of the weight of all of that. That's what conscious leadership is to your organizations, to your companies, to our society, is we need the people that are willing to hold that weight and say, even under that, I'm still going to do the right thing. So that's my plea to all of you. And again, I'm speaking and preaching to the choir here, a little different group, right? That's our job. We need to spend our time being the light, right, out in a lot of darkness, and teach people that the power of human connection and really seeing people and understanding them for who they are is what's going to change the world. It's no one single person. It's certainly not a political figure. There's no one person that can do this. It's going to take an army of all of us that say we want to show up differently. That's what I got for you. So just a couple of pieces here. This is the book. It's pre-order on Amazon. It'll actually be shipping on the 20th, I think. I know, it's a big deal, you guys. If any of you have written a book, it's 2 years of your life you can't get back. Nights and weekends, my family will attest. And the biggest deal is the launch. So whether you want to read it, whether you have somebody in your network or in your family that would want to read it, pre-ordering it, leaving a review is the biggest gift that you could ever give me, because that's going to help us get this message out there. And that's the only way it happens. I can only speak so much, right? Only so many people can hear me, but that's really important to me. And I actually have one, so I only have so many advanced copies. And I felt so bad in the timing that I didn't have a whole case of books to bring today, but I did bring one. And so one of the seats you're sitting in has a yellow Post-it note underneath it. and that person gets this book. So you've got to reach under your seat. I came in early, so no one saw me. Anyone find the Post-it note? I know the chairs were kind of weird, and it's really hard to get underneath there. Anyone find the Post-it note? I think. You can stop checking. I think it's over here. Unless it fell off. Do you have it? Yay! I put it on table 2 because 2 is my lucky number.
Well, thank you so much.
Absolutely. So I've got a little bit of time, right? Yeah, and there's handouts with a QR code. If you need to know how to use a QR code, come up here and ask these girls because they probably know how to do it because they're super smart and that kind of stuff. And then I also have another handout there for what we call our business impact assessment. It's a free assessment, 20 questions that you can do yourself with your team to really start the dialogue about how can we be better as an organization. So it's just some great conversation starters and questions for you to assess your business.